Successful trading comes simply down to these three things. You need a method, you need money management, and you need mindset. Okay, so method, you need a profitable strategy that you have proven has a profitable expectancy, right? Whether that's through back testing or forward testing. You also need money management, right? Okay, risk management. If you don't have this nailed down, this is one of the easiest things in trading. If you're struggling with that, this channel probably isn't for you, right? You need to have that nailed down. Risk 1% per trade, keep it consistent. You compound up, you compound down. It's impossible to blow an account. End of story. And then the final thing is you need a mindset to be able to consistently execute the rules from your profitable method. Okay, so traders love to argue until they're blue in the face all day about, which one's more important and what percentage makes up your trading, 90% psychology, all this stuff. At the end of the day, you need all three. That's what it comes down to. Now, most people, and probably yourself included if you're watching this, you probably have somewhat of a profitable method in your hands. Your money management is probably quite sound. So if you're not hitting your trading goals, then what's the missing piece of the puzzle, right? It's your mindset. Now, before you roll your eyes and lose your interest, you think, oh no, another wishy-washy psychology thing. You need to confront that this is the thing that is holding you back, right? But actually, we're gonna dive into this in probably a way that you may not have seen before. And in all my experience mentoring, but then also in my own journey, what is the major thing that is holding people back that can be solved? And when you solve it, everything then starts to go on the right path. And that's what I found is most people have their head living in fantasy land, right? And when your expectations are not aligned with reality, that typically manifests into your trading in two main ways. And the first way is the time that it takes to reach profitable consistency on significant capital. Okay, now you've probably seen a graph like this or something similar if you've, in anywhere near the world of personal development. So again, bear with me. In about 2 minutes time, we're going to dive into some really deep stuff here that I can almost guarantee you have not heard before, okay? But time to consistency, it's a big fantasy that many traders have in their head, and they overestimate, right, what they can achieve in the short term, in a few months. So you see that steep curve of what they expect. I'll join a course, I'll blast through the videos, I'll get there consistently, and actually reality is nowhere near that. But then the flip side to this is they massively underestimate what you can achieve in just a few years, right? If you stick to the process properly, you have balanced and aligned expectations nearer to reality. When you do the work properly on the right timeline, and then you let those compounding effects kick in, you can get there much, much quicker in the long run than the person who has their expectations warped from reality. Again, this will make a bit more sense in a minute as we dive in, but it's a classic case of watching a course thinking you're going to be consistent. Like, would you watch, a video course on flying a plane and then expect to fly a jumbo jet? Right? Crash course, crash landing. Now, why is it so hard for the humans to kind of think on that long enough timeline? And it's because our brains, for hundreds of thousands of years, if not longer, they were designed for an immediate return environment, right? If you're a hunter-gatherer, a caveman, you're just thinking about the next meal. Everything's short term, right? But only in the last few hundred years has society now been designed to reward, the delayed return actions that you're going to take, right? So our brains are designed to value the short-term immediate returns, but it's very hard to take those actions that are going to, get us to the place that we need to, in just a few years. Now, another part of that consistency, even if we can get our minds, if I go back a few slides, to accept the fact of that more reality curve, that have that longer term outlook, we still think it's going to be that smooth upward curve. But actually in reality, as probably a lot of you have experienced, especially in trading, it always feels like you're almost taking 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. your progression is not always reflected in your P&L, and that is very hard to get your minds around, right? It's very hard to keep following on the processes and trusting the journey to get there, right? And that's again where your expectations are misaligned with reality. And this is what is holding so many of you back, okay? So that's time to consistency. And then the second one that people have, complete fantasies about is how much money you will make and within what time frame. So again, show you a quick example of how this manifests into so many people's trading that I'm seeing. They have a profitable strategy, they know how to manage their risk, but simply because their expectations are not aligned with reality, it massively damages their trading. So I'll show you. So we're going to start with an expectation here of making 10R in a month, because with the absolute explosion of prop firms, most of them use sort of around that 10R mark as the the minimum goal that you need to reach within about 30 days or whatever. So this has now become the new baseline for most people's expectations of what makes you a good trader or having a good profitable month. That's the expectation, right? Most people now have completely baked into their head. So imagine, you're about halfway through into the month, you've completely followed your plan, you've been disciplined, you've stuck to your rules, you've stuck to your risk management, and you're traveling along, your equity curve's going the right way, and you're sitting around 5R halfway through the month. And this happens all the time in our community. I see it again and again and again. Traders are doing well, they're doing everything right, they're profitable, but because their expectations is aligned at I should be making 10R every month, or even some people 20, 30R, they have this expectation in their head. And they're looking at their results now, and their reality is not aligned with their expectation. They start to move away from what they were doing, which was the right things, the process based, and they start to project their expectations on the market, right? Their outcome based expectations that actually, no, I need to hit that 10R, I'm running out of time. So what do? They over risk, they over trade, they take low probability setups, and then reality starts to kick in. And whereas if they didn't have their expectation, they forgot about these targets that they're projecting onto the market, and they stuck to just executing their rules, they probably would have taken maybe one or two valid high probability trades over the last few weeks, and they probably would have smashed 10R. But because they were trying to force it, they make mistakes, and in the end, they end up their month break even or a little bit in a loss. So you've gone from having something extremely profitable in your hands that can literally change your life if you can zoom out and have that long enough outlook, to then trying to rush things, make all these mistakes, and then you end up every month a little bit in the red, tiny little bit in the green, just messing things up. And it's all, you see how it comes back to having your expectations not aligned with reality. Okay, so you by projecting your outcome-based expectations onto the market of what you think the market should deliver to you, right? You end up self-sabotaging. So trade your plan, generic phrase you always hear, but it's so true, not your P&L. Okay, we will never know when our wins and losses are going to come, so we just have to stick to our rules. Now, if your beliefs about trading are balanced, realistic, and empowering, you will naturally have the greatest probability of success. Now, that sentence might seem a bit wishy-washy. I think that's fair. It might not mean too much to you right now. So what we're about to now dive into will make this make a ton more sense, okay? So to go back to it, your beliefs must be balanced, realistic, and empowering. So most people's aren't, they're way off in fantasy land. So to make them balanced, realistic, and empowering, what do you have to do? You need to neutralize your fantasies. But how do we go about that? What is the process of doing this? And that's a tool that you can use today, okay? Now, within the course, literally in the first module with our Photon Pro memberships, we go massively deep into this. We dive into quantum physics and everything, because it's super important to make sure that your beliefs are balanced, realistic, and empowering from the get-go, okay? And this is a massive part of what we work on at Photon, okay? So what we're gonna look at is a diagram of your human mind. Okay, so bear with me. I promise you're going to learn something super interesting today. Okay, so this line, okay, at the top we have positive charges, right? Positive perceived perceptions of something. And then down at the bottom is where we are going to have negative charges in our mind, negative emotions attached to it. Okay, perceived negative perception of something, right? On this line. So positive at the top, negative at the bottom. Across this line here, this represents time. Okay, so all the way to the left, we have the past. In the middle, we have the present. And all the way to the right, we have the future. Okay? So the future can only exist in our imagination, right? The future is not a thing in reality, because once you're in the future, it obviously becomes the present. So the future only exists in our imagination. It's a construction of the mind, a construct of the mind, I should say. Likewise, the past is the exact opposite. That can only exist in our memory, right? Within our minds. We can never actually live in the past. We can only live in the past in our memory. They did not exist. The present is all we have. So, resentment, that is a negatively charged perception of something that has happened to us in the past in our memory. So a quick example is let's say you got bullied in school, and that was, a really negatively perceived thing in your mind. And some people hold on to that resentment the whole of their life because they look back at it and all they can see is the negative outcomes from, that experience. Okay, that they've failed to see the positive benefits of what they got from actually being bullied. That, maybe it toughened them up, etc., etc. But we'll go into this in a bit more in a bit. Now, infatuations, this is the exact opposite of that resentment, okay? So this is where you're looking back in the past and past memories, and you can only see the positives. You can't see any negatives to it. So a quick example of this would be, say, you're thinking of an ex-girlfriend, that, your first love or whatever, and all you can think about is all the positives, whereas you've forgotten, your mind has blocked out the negatives, and you're infatuated with that person in the past, okay? Now you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with trading? But I'm getting there, don't worry, okay? Now, if we look at fear, this is in the future, right? You're fearful of something happening to you or whatever in the future. And that is because you are only in your mind seeing the potential negatives of that situation or event occurring, right? But it's all in your mind. You are only seeing the negatives. So what's the flip side of that? Well, that's if you have a fantasy, right? A fantasy of something happening in the future that is only going to be good. There's only positives to this thing happening, okay? And that's kind of really the main thing that we're talking about today in our trading, okay? And a massive thing, to use a good example for this, is getting funded, right? So many traders have this fantasy that getting funding is just going to solve all of their problems in the world. There's only good things about it, and they have it up on this pedestal, and it's people are living in fantasy land about it. And as I tried to show you in those graphs before, unfortunately, when you have a fantasy about something and your expectations are not aligned with reality, we've seen how that can damage your trading in so many different ways. And that's why I said at the start, remember, you need the more balanced, empowering, and realistic your beliefs are, right, the greater probability you will give yourself success. And it still might not, the penny might not have dropped on what that means yet. So let me show you, okay? Funding. You hear this before, people put it on a pedestal. What does that mean? Well, people are infatuated with a goal, such as, insert whatever goal you have here. It works, it's the same process, right? But we're using funding on a pedestal. People are infatuated with it. They assume that funding, if they achieve it, it's going to bring them far more advantages than disadvantages. And what do? They self-minimize in respect to that goal that they've put up here, right? They place their self-worth as a trader on whether they've achieved that goal, whether they're funded or not. And if they don't have that, then they're looking down on themselves. They don't think they're worthy. They don't think they're a successful trader because they haven't hit that 10R or whatever the metrics are to become funded. So why is that dangerous to your trading? Well, if you're thinking that you are not successful as a trader until you've achieved that goal, whatever it is, let's just say simple, hit the 10R that month, then every time you take a loss, which as we know in trading is normal, it's a cost of doing business, but every time you take that loss, it's going to feel like a direct threat to your goals. And you're going to take them super personally. It's going to hurt. Your emotions are going to be through the roof. And as we all know, when your emotions are through the roof and you're trying to avoid losses, you're not following your plan. It's not conducive to profitable trading, right? You start doing everything wrong. You guys know how that can manifest into your trading. If you're scared of losses, you're going to start making mistakes such as fear of, you're going to hesitate on executing those trades because you're not going to want to take another loss. Then you miss the winner, and then you have that perpetual cycle of the break-even dance and never achieving your goals. Or it could be the opposite. We start overtrading, you're trying to rush it with the time limits, you're risking too much. Again, it all comes down to having this thing on a pedestal, not having reality align with, having your expectations of what the market is going to provide in line with reality, and then you're not making the right trading decisions. Okay? So if you're fantasizing about this goal, you lower the probability and or the speed of you achieving it. Okay, so being neutral is the quickest way to get there. Okay, cool. So how do we do that? Well, going back to this diagram, anything you have in your life, you'll be able to fit within one of these 4 quadrants. And obviously what we just spoke about here is a fantasy. So if we're only seeing the positives of what we think will happen if we achieve this goal, how do we then stop making it that positive fantasy, and how do we bring it back into the present? How do we neutralize it? Well, if there's only positives, then we need to neutralize it by being aware of what the potential negatives are of achieving that goal, right? And when you do this, you see at the bottom there, it says wisdom is the instantaneous recognition of both sides to an event. Okay, so if you see a fantasy, you're not aware of the hidden negatives. Okay, so you need to be, the quicker you can be aware of both, right? That's wisdom essentially. So if you're fearful of something, you're only seeing the negatives, you need to see the positives. Okay, so how do you dissolve a fantasy about prop funding? Well, just simply start listing the drawbacks of actually trading prop firm capital. Imagine you're funded, or you've got a profit split. So now you've got to give away X percentage of the profit that you make and you've worked for. Risk limits that are super tight, that are designed for the most part to make you fail. Right? It's extremely hard to hold on to a funded account compared to your own personal. You've got time limits to hit the target. You've got profit targets to hit that can be hard to hit month to month. Consistency rules, restrictions on leverage. Can you trade through news? You've got to wait for your payouts. Can't trade certain instruments, right? You've got to use their broker. There's, the firm could go bankrupt. How long are you going to rely on that long term? They can change their rules. Terms and conditions changing all the time. It's a nightmare. You've got to pay fees, tax issues. How secure is that job really if you're relying on them, right? The list is endless. But you see how the whole process here is what I want you to take is if you have this thing up on a pedestal and you think it's going to be so good when you achieve it, you need to neutralize that, become very centered, calm and balanced around it by being aware that, yeah, okay, it's a thing worth pursuing, but actually there are all these things here. And then suddenly you bring that goal off the pedestal and you level yourself with it. And when you level yourself with it, then it's only a matter of time before you achieve it. Okay, because the whole time you have it up here, you are drastically hindering your chances of achieving it. Okay, now this is another way of illustrating the mind. I'm not going to go too deep into here. This is good. We go a lot more depth with our Photon memberships, but I'll kind of give you a quick crash course. But essentially those negative and positive emotions we were talking about, right? If you think of those at the bottom, that is where the masses are, okay? So if you think of a pendulum and people are just swaying from one pole to the next, right? So if you think about this, an ion, we know in physics, is a charged particle. And if we say someone is an emotional person, what are they? They're a charged person, right? Sometimes they're very elated and then they swing all the way back to them being depressed and then they're elated and they're depressed, right? That is where the masses are. Okay, it's like just trying to chase on one side, chase the highs, get drunk on the weekend, and then what do? They swing back and then get the hangover, right? So all these things, if you're constantly trying to chase wins in trading and you feel elated when you win, what's going to happen when you eventually and inevitably take a loss? You're going to feel depressed, you're going to take it personally, you're going to make more mistakes, right? The losing masses are down here, swaying between those emotions, and the heads are just a mess. Whereas actually, where are the masters playing? Where are the consistently profitable, 10% of professional traders, right? They're calm, they're centered, and balanced, right? They're not down here with the low vibration masses. They are vibrating at a higher frequency. They have evolved toward the light, okay? A photon is a particle of light. These particles do not have any charges, because you have synthesized the negative and the positive charge to see the light, okay? So I know this is getting a bit wishy-washy. I don't want to dive too deep into it now. We can, if you guys want to go deeper, let me know in the comments. Sometimes it's a bit too esoteric for YouTube, but let me know, I'd be keen to know. The point I'm trying to make here is that you don't want to be poisoned with your emotions, because it does not lead to conducive trading decisions in the long run. You want to be at the top, you want to be poised, calm, centered, and balanced, where your expectations are aligned with reality, right? You're not projecting your expectations into the market of what you think you need the market to provide for you in a certain time frame, okay? Now, another quick example I'll give you is escaping the rat race, right? People talk about this all the time. I need to escape my current situation. I need to escape my job. I need to escape this country, or whatever it is. It's a big one, okay? Now, this was a big one that I experienced and was kind of hard to get my mind around. But if you're always talking about, escape, I need to escape this current job, I hate this job, whatever, you are in this escape mindset. And when you're in that mindset, similar to what we were talking about before, what does it do? It leads to you taking negative actions, okay? Because you are only seeing the negative sides of, or you're only perceiving the negative sides of the situation that you're in, okay? So when you start taking the wrong decisions, that then leads to poor results, which then keeps you in the same area or is reinforcing, the negative outcomes of what you're doing. And then you're just stuck in this death loop, right? And so many of you are failing because you're in such a rush to escape this situation that you feel is negatively holding you back. But the key to trading success, as we all know, is to play the long game. We all know that. But how do you do that? Because it requires gratitude for your current situation right now. Whatever your situation is right now that you're resenting, if you flip that and you start to be grateful for it, you'll be in a much more stable mindset, right? As it says here, having an escape mindset, it doesn't serve you, right? It's really unstable because you're too emotionally charged, okay? So instead of saying, how can I escape my current situation, which is disempowering, it's limiting, it's negative, just change your language a little bit and it will massively change your mindset, your actions, and then therefore your results, okay? So instead of saying, how can I escape my current situation, say, how can I transition from my current job to trading for a living? Do you see how it's such a simple change in language, but the massive impact that then has is empowering, it's liberating, it's positive, right? Because you probably don't hate your job. You're just using it as a gateway to become successful to achieve your other goals, right? Now, think about it this way. You could leverage your job to build trading capital so that you have a bigger account and you can make more money and you don't have to rely on prop firms and other stuff we're talking about. And another way to think about it, which is probably the most powerful one for me, is you are literally getting paid to learn how to trade, right? Do you see how that's a simple sentence that is true and it completely flips it in your mind? And suddenly you can see that you are leveraging your job to massively increase the chance of your success, and you're also going to have more fun and enjoyment whilst you're doing it, okay? So again, coming back to this diagram, whatever you are in your life, if you're fearful of something in the future, you just need to be aware of what the hidden positives of that situation is that you haven't thought about just yet, and that will bring you back into the present Likewise, if you had this big goal that you're just, completely fantasizing about, I'll give you another quick example, right? Let's say, you're fantasizing about having a supercar. You think this will be so amazing, and you just have this thing and the thing, but you haven't thought about the hidden negatives. So what's some hidden negatives? Well, how much is it going to cost? Servicing, petrol, tax. Can I park it anywhere? People are going to steal it. People are going to key it. All of these things. And then suddenly you realize, well, actually, it's not that great. It is what it is. It's a thing that's nice to have, but it's not this amazing thing that's just going to completely change your life. Okay, so wisdom is the instantaneous recognition of seeing both sides to an event. Okay, when you first start dating someone, you only see their positives. It's amazing. You start infatuating with them or fantasizing what the future is going to be like with them in the future, and then the honeymoon period wears off. You start to realize they're a bit annoying. Sometimes they smell, right? Whatever. You're starting to now find out what those hidden perceived negatives were that you hadn't seen before, and it completely then has you balanced, centered, and poised. Okay, so it's all about trying to open up and perceive where there are hidden negatives to positives, and vice versa, where there are negatives to the hidden positives. Okay, so I get that some of this can seem quite esoteric, but it honestly is holding so many people back, right? To really kind of give you a more practical example with trading, and probably the most simple one, and the one that I see the most, is that traders are following their plan. They're doing everything right. They can maybe do it for a few days, maybe a few weeks, maybe even a few months. Okay, but at some point it creeps in that they're not quite achieving what they thought they were going to achieve, or it's not quite in the time frame that they had committed to in their mind, and then suddenly that affects them, and then they start making the wrong decisions, and then they end up putting themselves even further away from achieving that goal. So if you can realign your expectations to be more in line with reality, that's why I keep saying here, if your beliefs about trading are balanced, realistic, and they're empowering, it will massively increase the probability of your success. Okay, and I see the people who are successful in our program, nearly all of them go through this process, and it's understandable. You kind of rush through the course, whatever. You don't really listen to the roadmap that we lay out. But the ones who are successful, they realize that, they drop their ego, they then go back to the start, and they take it slower. Okay, but by taking it slower, they actually are the ones who then get to those goals within that timeline, rather than the other ones who are just spinning their wheels, not really getting anywhere. Which is why I said at the start, this is what is holding most people back. Okay, so if you can work through this process, be aware of what the potential drawbacks are, bring yourself back into reality, because honestly, I get DMs from people, and it's a tragedy, saying I haven't made 20, 30 and they're comparing themselves to all these other people. And then I actually speak to them, find out more about the trading, find out about the results. And, they've strung 2 or 3 positive quarters together. Some months are plus 10R, some months are maybe slightly negative, some months are slightly positive. But because their perception of what profitable trading is, that it should be this double-digit 10R every single month, they think they're not a successful trader. So they start changing what they were doing to try and reach that, and they're completely self-sabotaging. It's scary to think how many traders could have made it by now, trading serious capital, if they had balanced, realistic, and empowering beliefs from the start. So I really hope you learned something new today. I really hope you took value from this. Watch it as many times as you need. If you want us to go deeper on this, let me know in the comments. I know not everyone's going to resonate with this sort of more esoteric stuff, but that diagram here, you can dive deep into this. You can apply this to any parts of your life, not outside of trading. And when you truly understand it, it is a super powerful mental model to use. So yeah, I find this stuff really, really exciting the more and more you learn about it.